Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Nonprofit Coffee Talk. So excited to have Jodi here today. We'll get started officially in just a little bit less than a minute. So do your last minute running to get water, whatever you need to do, and we'll get going. And thank you for being here with us today. The sun's out, actually. Is the sun out where you are?
It is. I had a breakfast meeting. I'm in Worthington today. I went to the breakfast meeting with an umbrella and gloomy skies, etc.
Yes.
I left a light on at home for my dog because I thought he'd be in the dark all day. And then an hour and a half later, I drove from a coffee shop in Worthington over to the offices in full sunlight, wondering where this day came from.
I know, it's really nice, isn't it? It's
beautiful
great
today, actually,
yeah.
especially for January.
Right? I think it's going to be almost 60 or something too. So
it's a little creepy, but on a day like today, I'm like, I kind of take it. Yeah.
I know when I celebrate it, I'm like, oh, should I be doing that?
I know. Yeah. My environmentalist friends are not happy to celebrate, but I confess, when I go take the dog for a walk this afternoon wearing a sweatshirt and not having the mittens and boots and the whole thing, it will be a very enjoyable afternoon.
Right. I agree completely. I know I feel a little guilty, but well, let's go ahead and get officially started because we have a lot of stuff to talk about today. Again, thank you for tuning in with us. We appreciate you being out there. Please ask questions in the chat. I'll monitor that and I'll try to monitor the LinkedIn channel as well. And so please ask questions. I am so excited to have Jodi Bopp, Vice President of Advancement with I Am Boundless, here today to talk about major gifts aren't only for major organizations. I love this topic so much. Major gifts can be really scary for people. And they don't have to be. We're going to demystify that a little bit today, Jodi is. So I want to read your bio, Jodi, because it's fascinating. And I remember when I first met you, I think you had a bigger impact on me than I had on you, but I think it was when you were winning the AFP Fundraiser of the Year award. I think I was at your ceremony. I think I was in that AFP meeting, so it was a long time ago.
Yes,
but it's nice.
Yeah, no,
it's nice
awesome
to be reconnected. So thank you.
Yes, and thank you for the invitation. Thrilled to be here, specifically to talk about this topic.
Yes. So when I always send a questionnaire out to my guests ahead of time to get a little information about them. And when I asked Jodi about what idea she would bring to the Nonprofit Coffee Talk, I loved what she said, which is transformational gifts are often affiliated exclusively with big organizations like hospitals, universities, foundations, big national organizations. Meanwhile, smaller organizations struggle year after year in this cycle of annual giving and grants and events that are very labor intensive. Transformational gifts can happen at smaller organizations too, and they can be a game changer. But it requires a significant shift in the way that non-for-profits look at the way they raise money and even how they talk and or feel about themselves. I love that. I can't wait to dig in a little bit. So Jodi leads the advancement team at I Am Boundless. She has nearly 30 years of experience in nonprofit philanthropy, working in diverse nonprofits and helping raise millions of dollars for worthy causes. She worked at Ohio Wesleyan University, Ohio State University, the Ohio State University,
yes,
Friendship Village in Dublin. She's been very involved in the Association of Fundraising Professionals. She's actually a certified fundraising executive, which I'm so impressed with. I got right to the point where I needed to take the exam, and then I was like, do I really need to do this? So anybody that actually does it, I'm always impressed with, because it's really it's a little bit, kind of a lot of work, but well worth it. So good for you. And Jodi passionately believes in the transformative power of philanthropy and enjoys the opportunity to work with those who want to help others lead a boundless life. Beautiful. So thrilled to have you here.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I'm Libby V, nonprofit champion and founder of Libby V and Associates. And through visioning and strategy work, leadership coaching, development support, and organizational and board development, our nonprofit leader clients successfully raise more money and have more impact. But not all nonprofits can afford to hire a consultant. So I created the Nonprofit Coffee Talk as a way to provide great content, great guests like Jodi, helpful information to as many nonprofits as possible. I hope you find it useful. I'm always open to hearing your suggestions about guests or topics you'd like to have us address. And if you want to be a guest yourself, please reach out to me. I appreciate it. So with all of that, let's get started. Our time will go by very fast and we have a lot of things to talk about. So I think I'd want to ask you a little bit to dig in a little bit about what is a transformational gift. We talk about those a lot, but what does that mean?
Mm-hmm. So transformational gift, in the most general sense of the word, you could talk about all gifts are transformational gifts. They transform the organization in hopefully, of course, positive ways. But I also believe that it should transform the donor in a positive way. And candidly, often the amount of that gift helps that transformation. If it's, to borrow a phrase from our colleagues who work in faith-based philanthropy, if it's a gift from the heart, if it's a gift that you have to think about and really is part of who you are at your core. I find that faith-based organizations are sometimes a little more comfortable talking about sacrificial giving. That's the word I'm looking for, sacrificial. It depends on what your organization is. Obviously, at very, very large organizations, it takes a lot of money to transform something. And so often they'll call it a major gift or a leadership gift, and it could be $50,000. At a smallish organization, it could be $10,000, it could be $25,000, it could be $50,000, it could be $100,000. Here at Boundless, we consider a transformational gift on a spreadsheet to be a $25,000 payable over no more than 5 years. So it's $5,000 a year in theory. Some, obviously every donor is different and it all depends, but it also, the word transformational can be applied to the project or the program. Doesn't mean it's new, doesn't mean it's brand new. It can be something that you're doing already, but it clearly transforms the lives of the people you serve. And it is a big enough commitment on the part of the donor that it transforms them by through you having their own impact on the people they serve. And they do have to think about it. I think all of us have made that $10 contribution before to a friend, to something. 6 months later, if you don't remember it, it's not transformational.
That's a really great way to put it. I often get asked the question, and I think this is kind of past history, I think, but major gifts, small organizations get concerned about, how do we define a major gift? Like, what's a major gift? And there's no one answer, right? There's
Right.
no one answer about, I love how you framed the transformational gift though. And it's wonderful. So how does that compare to thinking about a major gift? And are you using transformational in place of major gift?
I'm using it in place of major gift, especially externally. Now, when I'm sitting with the finance team, then I'm probably going to switch over and use the word major because you really are looking at a spreadsheet. And I think the part, language is important. I think, I think all fundraisers, certainly all communicators believe that words matter. And by, in higher ed, big hospitals, big foundations, they need a clearly defined major gift definition, and that's great and it works for them, but that I think means smaller shops shy away from that because there is a part of this process where you are looking at a human being with a good intentions and a big heart, and you're looking at them based on what they can give to your organization, and that does not feel good. It feels like you're judging, it feels like you're putting into have and have nots, and can spin out into the top 1%. And there's all kinds of, concerns about who are those folks and et cetera. And I acknowledge all of that. But if you ignore transformational gifts as just, major gifts belong to others, candidly, you're leaving money on the table. And worse, you're not inviting people to transform themselves through their philanthropy. And to me, that's not only bad for your bottom line, that's bad for humanity.
Yeah. It's such a good shift in name, right? Because it matters. It matters what you call it, because there are connotations and we have to put things into files in our brain and we put that into one category. Because I think one of my favorite shifts in development in the last few years in philanthropy is this notion of not categorizing people by size of gift and treating them differently based on the size, so that anybody that gives over X number of dollars as a gift gets extra treatment, like extra special. I don't know if you want to talk about that at all, but I just love this definition of transformational. Yeah. It's a different size for different people, right?
Right,
What's
exactly. And knowing
for me is
what the different sizes are, here at Boundless, we are, if you will, a mid-sized shop. So there's me and two people on the philanthropy team. One of them is an individual giving person. So her all day, every day, she's on the phone, she's going to appointments, she's meeting with people, and she's going through the qualification process. And in some cases, transformational is maybe $1,000 a year payable over 5 years, so $5,000. So again, higher ed or the big shops would call that leadership annual, and there's nothing wrong with that. I do think for some people, a transformational gift is $100. The question becomes for your shop is, if you're going to do transformational giving, it takes as much time to transform somebody with $100 gift, sometimes as $1,000 gift or a $10,000 or $100,000 gift, and make sure you're spending your time on those, the extra. It's not so much extra treatment, it's more time, because you're only one person. Even if you've got a big shop, you've only got so many people. And so how are you spending your day? And candidly, you want to spend your day with people who can move the needle for you. But that's going to be different for everybody. And it does not at any point mean that all people who give to your organization or might give to your organization don't have value as human beings. But right. At the end of the day, the love for your organization with no money doesn't pay the bills. And so, have to look at it like that.
That is really amazing framing, right? Because it's true. It's, it's not a value judgment. It's how do I spend my time to get the best, for lack of a better term, and it sounds cold, ROI, right? Like we have to raise a certain amount of money, and there's only so many of us and so much time in the day. So really good framing of that. And so let's talk a little bit more about, transformational gifts. So and I love the notion of time spent, right? Because I always get into this argument with people about events, as a fundraising tool. It's like, well, how much money did you raise? Well, you could probably do that in, a couple of hours, maybe. So it's a tough conversation to have. But
right.
So how do you create those transformational gift programs, or how do you start doing that focus on transformational gifts, and what has to be, what do you have to have in place?
Right.
I would love to know let's give people some real tactical approaches to what to do, what to do and how to do it.
Yeah. So the first thing you need, of course, is a person or part of a person, and that person and whoever supervises them has to say, this is a long game. You don't have the immediate returns of send a mailing, send an email. It is more like grant work, because I would argue that especially private foundations, et cetera, transformational gifts for me fall in that bucket. It's just they're choosing to give through their foundation versus, through their assets. So you need to know that you need to spend the time, and you're not probably going to see a huge rate of return for about 18 to 24 months. The more time you spend, the more it will pay off. You should see a huge rate of return after no more than 3 years. Most of the people I've worked with, we pull it off in about 2.5, where they're raising well beyond their cost of the department to the organization. So you need the time, and you need a designated staff member who knows this is part of my job. This isn't just sort of an add-on when you're trying to run around crazy doing 18 events a year. You also need to have leadership, preferably, of course, in a perfect world, both your president, CEO, executive director, whatever that person's title is, and enough board members to help set vision. Again, this does not have to be a creative individual who's got a lot of shiny objects in their bag of tricks of things you aren't doing today. It can be, though, talking passionately about the mission that you are doing in a way that is compelling and personal. They're not giving a speech in front of a crowd. They're talking to someone over a cup of coffee or in an office or in a living room. And so you need somebody in a leadership position, whether that's your president, whether that's your head of programs, whether that's your board chair. And again, in an ideal world, it's several people. So you've got several partners. To a degree, it's you, but it's always, we're the conduits. As I say, in my world, when someone who doesn't know anything about anything in philanthropy says, "What do you do for a living?" And I tell them, and they look at me, like, okay, what's that? I say I'm a professional handholder between organizations that serve people with needs and people with means who want to make a difference. And when I can hold hands and make that match, then it's like an electrical current running through. And literally for me, it really is when that match hits. And so you've got to have somebody on the organization side whose hand you can hold when you're out looking for the donors. So you need at the very least that. And in this day and age, and candidly, this does involve some dollars, but not as much as it used to. You need research.
Yeah.
That can be a lot. If you have a CRM, often it's built into the CRM, or you can purchase for not a ton of money a module that'll get you there. iWave, for example, is a very common one. I'm not necessarily endorsing it because there's other great ones, but that's the one that we use here at Boundless because it fits with our software. It came automatically, actually. If you don't have a CRM and you don't have software, then you can actually purchase, you can contract with researchers now. You didn't used to be able to. And they're folks who look at your database and tell you who potentially has wealth based on public record searches. The internet is an amazing tool, and a lot of this data is available online. And candidly, we could do it one person at a time, but there are firms and companies. You can either send your whole database to a firm and they send it back for one fee, or you can contract with somebody. Locally here in Columbus, there's Research Pro. We've worked with Regina for several years, very happily. I will give her an endorsement because, again, very happily. But there are others that will then go through and qualify your prospects or qualify your database and say, we'll use easy numbers. If you've got 100 people in your database, these 20 look like they have the most potential to be able to make a gift. Pardon me. Now, that doesn't mean they will. That doesn't mean they want to.
Right.
But they could. They have the assets in order to make an impact gift, however you define it. Yeah. And then it's up to the team, the philanthropy team, and maybe the team at the organization who knows these folks. And then you decide who has the heart for your organization. As I will often say to my team, Bill Gates has more money in the world, but to the best of my knowledge, he has no idea who Boundless is or cares about what we do. Let's not worry about him. That's chasing a fool's errand. But who in our database cares passionately about what we do and has assets? Let's do a preliminary meeting with the CEO or the head of programs or whatever. Or do we have a board member who knows that person? We will often share names with our board members. Who knows this individual? Can you broker a first date, if you will, a first meeting, and go from there?
Yeah. And often that research is so important for major gifts. You just, it really is, sort of frames it, right? Here's what they have the means to do. One thing I like too that you can get back from good donor research or prospect research is their connections, right? Sometimes that often is, they put it together so nicely. Like you could do the research yourself. It's very time consuming. You're not going to get nearly as much information as they can provide. And they just put it together so well, and it's so user friendly. You can just take it and make a plan with it, right? And that's really the important part. Great. Okay, so we're going to do some research. CRMs, by the way, are very affordable these days. I can remember the old Razor's Edge days when I was working at a very large nonprofit, and we were paying 5 figures a year for that, and now it's like less than $100 a month. You can have a good CRM. So anyway, I wanted to put that in there because people are kind of afraid that they can't afford them.
There's fortunately a lot, at least until Razor's Edge buys them all.
Right.
There's in this day and age, there's more and more of those available, and you can spend any number of dollars. But almost all of them now have some kind of research component, either as an add-in cost or as a baked in module. It may not be the most in-depth, but at least it gets you started.
Yes.
And again, it's really meant to point you in the right direction. There's no guarantees, of course, but you can't see 100 people in a timely fashion, but you could probably see the 20 in, say, a 3 or 4 month time frame.
Good. Okay, sorry, I stopped you. You were on a good path there.
No, that's okay. And then the only other thing, and I think this is candidly the biggest hurdle for a lot of not-for-profits because of the culture they come from, is the culture to do major gifts, is the culture to say, John Smith loves our organization. Jack Smith loves our organization, but John Smith has a lot of money and Jack doesn't. So who are we going to invite to lunch with the CEO? And making that, again, you have to get over that. It may not feel good because it may feel like you're making a judgment call. You are not. That doesn't mean that both John and Jack are not wonderful human beings. And especially if you have a volunteer program, this is where all the people who love you without a ton of dollars, although many have dollars as well, that's in a perfect world. That's who can utilize those skills and those talents for the enrichment of your organization and themselves. Again, I always want it to be a win-win with both the organization and the donor. But where the philanthropy officer should spend their time, or the CEO, if you're the philanthropy officer, is with the person who can move that needle for you the best. Because the investing in relationships is time consuming. You are literally investing in a relationship with a human being. To a degree, you're investing your own relationship, but it isn't personal. It's corporate. The way a lawyer has clients or a financial planner has clients, you care about them. You are part of their world. You, in some cases, with good relationships, know a whole lot about them. But you're always there representing the organization. And so
I say it's a professional friendship, right? It's
Right.
like a friendship, but it's professional.
Yeah. I've had really close relationships professionally with lots. It's a privilege, candidly. It's one of the rewards of doing impact giving. And, when something happens to them, I've cried tears and I've attended funerals and all of that. But it's always knowing that I'm wearing the company lapel pin. I'm representing the organization.
That's right. Yeah. Great. I wonder if we could talk a little bit about, because, you talked about the roles of the ED and the development officer and then a board member, and maybe even a program manager or whatever. But, let's just get down to like real practical things. So, who reaches out, who goes to the first meeting, who does follow up. Like, I love that conversation about it really is a dyad or a triad or a quad, whatever that word is, that's for people.
And this is the fun part for me, and I think especially anybody who's ever had the luxury of doing this full time, especially at a big shop, it's what we call prospect strategy. And that's my favorite part, because then you really are talking about, okay, I want to go visit Libby. She's shown up on my list. Who knows Libby? What do I know about her? And again, some people feel like uncomfortable talking about, I'm looking at Libby on paper. I haven't met Libby yet, or I only met her the once. But it really is how we're going to eventually open up Libby's world and let her do something great. And that's how I approach it, because otherwise you really are just looking at dollars. But it depends. So if you by chance know this person because you've met them through your work, let's say they are a frequent volunteer, you see them in the office all the time, you just never thought about them as a giving prospect, then by all means go it alone on that first visit and just begin to talk and make. Not never, but I very rarely make an ask. I mean, maybe 1% of the time on a first visit. The only way that happens is when they turn to me and say, so I'd really like to make a gift, and then be prepared if they say that. But by and large, they don't. But I do start talking about how they ever thought about my organization, in this case, Boundless, making a bigger impact than they are now, or making an impact at all. Has it ever even occurred to them? And so I begin to plant seeds. There are some people who, you can do what I call kind of peer review, and that's maybe with your philanthropy committee of the board or the senior staff. They need to be highly confidential, but what do we know about this person? Does this person have a big ego? It's okay. Then we have the CEO's assistant call. Or my favorite line, you can all write this down if you're busy trying to get visits. I've used this line. It is not foolproof, but it's the most effective I've ever found with cold calls, which is name of president, CEO, executive director, minus Dr. Patrick Maynard. Dr. Maynard asked me to reach out to you. So immediately you're bringing in the big gun without promising the big gun's going to be at the visit, and said, I should touch base with you. He admires what you're doing in the community, blah, 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 blah. Would love for me to get to meet you. Notice I haven't committed the CEO. In some cases, I know that's the only way I'm going to get this visit. And so I make sure, my CEO is a really wonderful fundraiser. And so I have full access to his calendar, and I know that I can schedule, as long as I respect his calendar, I can schedule meetings. I have the ability to schedule meetings without going through an assistant. And so I say, Dr. Maynard and I would like to meet with you. We'd like to get to know you a little better. We'd like to tell you about Boundless, and we'd like to talk to you about how you might be further engaged with us now or in the future. It may be that this person doesn't care about big titles, but cares passionately about boots on the ground. So find your most enthusiastic program person that can shake time away from their program duties and come with you to a coffee, a lunch, a Zoom call, whatever it is. And somebody who's just, they may not be the most sophisticated staff person in the world, but they are the most passionate, and it's just so blatantly obvious. And those are fun visits too.
I love that. That's perfect. That intro. It's so good, right? That is exactly right. And obviously if there's a board member that knows the person, they're going to be,
Right.
helping to facilitate a meeting that way.
Yeah.
So that's great.
Yeah.
And so, we only have a couple more minutes. This time always flies by. So I'm inviting you back, Jodi, for part 2. And also Jodi and I might be cooking up some cool major gifts, like educational opportunities. So stay tuned for that. Because you just have so much to offer to this. So you go to this meeting. So what do you do? How do you start? What's your conversation starter and
Right.
all those things?
Right. So I generally, people like to talk about themselves. The hardest part for staff, and especially really enthusiastic program or leadership staff, is they want to tell you all about, again, I'll use Boundless because that's where I work. They want to tell you all about Boundless first. And often that works, but it can occasionally become like, oh, I'm not really being engaged with. So I generally say, I acknowledge how we connected. Oh, it was so nice for John or Jane or, to make this appointment if somebody helped facilitate, and especially if they're not there, tell me a little bit about you, and then tell me what you know about my organization. And so it gets them to talk about themselves. They almost always lead with the thing that's most important to them. I'm a title, that's important, or I founded my own company, or I'm the proud parent of, what have you. And then when you ask about what they know about your organization, then that tells you a lot too. And that kind of tells you where you are. Are they, I've been if there's somebody I know who's been a regular volunteer or former board member, I'll say, instead of tell me what you know about Boundless, I'll say, when did you first become affiliated with Boundless? Because now you're going to tell me how long you've been with my organization. And length is long time is good, as opposed to, oh, I just found out about you yesterday. I don't really know much. So that can help calibrate then how the rest of the conversation goes. And then you're always, always, always setting up for the next conversation, or why don't you come for a tour or whatever, because you're always keeping in mind, by the time I leave here, no matter what else we talk about, I also have to plant the seed for the next visit. That's
beautiful. Gail Perry, who is a sort of pretty well-known.
Yeah, I've gone to a couple of her trainings. She's fantastic.
Yeah, she's really great. Once said, and I love this saying, if you want advice, ask for money. If you want money, ask for advice.
Yeah.
And so I've always lived by that, right? Like trying to get prospects or donors to give me their wisdom around a topic, right? And so I like to ask questions like that. But sometimes that doesn't happen in the first visit, right? Because you don't know them well enough. That's just really a getting to know you thing. But I just loved that advice. So I wanted to throw that out there. Yeah. And so we have like a minute left. It goes by so fast. What would you say to people who are maybe part of a small nonprofit who are on here today listening, who are like, okay, I need to be doing major gifts. How do I balance this? What do I do? What would you, and they're a one person development officer, or they're the
Mhm.
ED doing ED and all the fundraising. They don't have a development person. What
Right.
advice would you give them about what to think about?
Yeah, I would say if you can identify, and likely, especially if you've been in the role for a while or with the organization for a while, or you can find that leader who's been for a while, identify a top five. Just start with five. Because often, because it can be daunting and the lists can be big or the lists are hard to look at or whatever, just think, who loves us and might have money? They live in a certain zip code. They have the vacation home in Florida. They put 4 kids through Ivy League schools 5 years ago, and now they're not paying tuition anymore. Just based on what you know about them today, put it on a Post-it and stick that Post-it on your laptop, screen, and challenge yourself that once a month, do an outreach just to those 5 people, not at the same time, one for Mary, one for John, one for Sally, whatever. And start building that relationship, bringing them into your organization, asking that advice about your organization, and beginning what is called moves management that will result in an ask of a transformational gift at some point. Just start with 5. You don't have to do them, in one day. You can schedule an afternoon, but set aside the time on your calendar, figure out who they are, and just start with 5.
I love it. That's great. And I think one of the places you could start is to look at your donors that you have and say,
Right.
is there anybody here who might be able to give a bigger gift, right? A
Right.
big gift,
Right.
a transformational gift. So,
Yeah.
All right, we're out of time. And this has been amazing. So like I said, stay tuned. Jodi and I are cooking up some opportunities here. And
Yeah.
thank you, Jodi, for spending time with me today. This was incredible.
Oh, thank you so much for the invitation. This is a passion area of mine. I just sort of, why leave all this fun to the big boys and girls when everybody can participate?
I love that. That's a good place to end. Thank you, all of you out there tuning in. Appreciate you so much, and hope that you have a really good day, and we'll see you next week.